to learn to work and learn about failure. Failure is a real thing. We're going to have failures in life. You're going to, in your marriage, you're going to have failures because, well, you have two imperfect people trying to live together. And both of you want to go have it your own way a lot of times. And so in marriage, you're going to have failure. And kids, as a kid, they're going to fail. And if you pamper them and coddle them, and they'll never learn failure. And then when they become an adult, well, case in point, we live in a society where my generation has pampered so many kids that are now in their 20s and their teens, and they cannot deal with life. Universities have to have a coping room where there's an animal that they can hug and cope because, well, we had a Donald Trump president because a Republican was a president. This is what we're turning out. We're having these people that have been coddled all their life as kids and not learning how to deal with failure, how to deal with disappointment. And so the result is, in verse 19 is, in verse 21 is, I'll have him become his son at the length. And you're just going to have to take care of that servant forever. At a certain point, the parents want the kids to leave home, right? I know some people are like, well, my kids can stay forever. I get how you love them that much, yes, but at a certain point, unless they are not able to do it mentally, they can't mentally be out there on their own, they need to be on their own. These 40-year-old people these 20, 30, 40-year-old people living in mama's basement? No. Never getting out and getting a job or living? No. Well, guess what mom and dad are going to have to do? Take care of them until they die. And then, what's going to happen to this guy, this girl? Well, they'll wind up in the penal system, and we'll be paying for them for the rest of our lives. And so, listen, we don't need to have this kind of mentality when raising children, right? And so, all three of these are a snare or a trap for yourself if you have these types of attitudes with your kids, or sometimes you need to have more than words. Not only that, you need to make sure we have a right attitude, and that we're not coddling, right? Because we need to prepare them for adulthood and not keep them in adolescence our whole life. So let's look at this in verse 20. Let's start in verse 24 and go down, talking about these kind of go together. It says, "Whoso is a partner with a thief hateth his own soul. He heareth cursing and berateth him not, and berateth it not." And so, listen, a snare of being a people pleaser. Do you know what a snare is? Most people know what a snare is. It's basically the type of rope where you kind of hang people, but you put it on the ground. A noose, you put it on the ground, and when an animal gets into it and they start walking, it tightens up and they can't go anywhere. A lot of people back in the day would use this with birds, all right? And so it's called a trap. That's what it is. It's a trap. And if we are focused on pleasing people, we will trap ourselves and we'll snare ourselves. And it says here in verse 24, "Whoso is a partner with a thief hateth his own soul. He heareth cursing and berateth it not." Let's talk about, listen, those who go along with stealing and hears cursing are more concerned with what the thief thinks and rather what the authorities think. Basically, talking about an accomplice. When you have an accomplice who cares more about the thief than actual rule and law, saying, listen, there's no hope for you. It's talking about heareth cursing, he bewareth. He was not saying when he hears that, well, the police are cracking down or you're an accomplice. Who was the guy who was the accomplice of Timothy McVeigh? You remember that guy's name? Well, listen, he was an accomplice. He didn't actually commit the crime, did he? But he was an accomplice. He knew about it. And because he knew about it, guess where this guy gets to spend the rest of his life? In jail, in prison, right? And so, listen, this is kind of going on a people pleaser. You would rather please this person that might be your friend that's a thief, and when somebody comes against him, you hear it, you're not going to, you tell him about it, and he gets away. But 25 is where I want to spend some time. The fear of man bringeth a snare. The fear of man bringeth a snare, but whoso putteth his trust in the Lord shall be safe. Listen, using connections with people won't get you as far as your connections with God. Using connections with people won't get you as far as your connections with God. Whoso is and talking about the fear of man bringeth a snare, but whoso putteth his trust in the Lord shall be safe. Listen, there are many folks in the Bible times, not in Bible times, but many folks in the Bible fell victim of wanting the approval of man rather than doing what's right. We have several. I mean, Moses made his wife his sister, right, when they went to Egypt. Do what? Well, Abraham, not Moses, yes, Abraham. I was thinking of Abraham, but Moses came out. Moses, because I have Aaron here. Moses was on the mount, right, getting the 10 Commandments, come down. What did Aaron say? The people made me do it. New Testament. Let's talk about Peter for a minute. Remember, Peter would go and eat dinner with the Gentile believers, and then when the Jewish believers came in, he got up and went to the Jewish table. He was more concerned about what the Jewish believers thought of him than the Gentile. Listen, when you are more interested in pleasing man than you are pleasing God, you are setting yourself for a trap. You are in a trap. Because listen, God, we know that when it comes to work, we need to please the boss, right? We get this is not what this is talking about. Let's make the connection here. We're not. There are good times when we need to please our man, whether it's or woman, whether it's your boss, husband, wife, right? But we're not talking about that. We're talking about we're more fearful of what people think about us than we are what God thinks about us. This is what Solomon's getting at. We can't be like Aaron and say, well, I can't do that because, well, what will the church think? You know, you say, well, shouldn't we care a little bit about what the church thinks? Not when it's dealing with your spiritual life. Who cares what people think? The only one that matters is God. When it comes with your marriage, it matters what God's doing in your marriage. Well, I'll tell you a case in point. We have people who won't go to the altar because of fear of what people will think. And that's worldwide at churches. People won't go to an altar because they're afraid, well, that message was about this, and so they must have a problem with that. Not necessarily, it may not have anything to do with that marriage, but with that certain subject that they were dealing with, but maybe God spoke to them through that subject about something else. You cannot allow man to care what other people think when you're dealing with your spiritual life. You can't care. You know, and I've gotten when I graduated Bible college, I had thing where I wanted to be approved of those that I went to Bible college with and my professors. I wouldn't wear a purple shirt for a long time. I wouldn't. Why? Because, well, in Bible college they say, don't wear a lavender or pink shirt when you preach. Or don't even wear it at all. Men, you ought not to wear shorts. I mean, there are certain standards, and I understand as a Bible college, and when you're a teenager, you need certain standards to be brought on you so you can learn standards. But when I got out of Bible college, there were certain things I wouldn't do because I was more fear of what if somebody posts something on Facebook and they see Marc in a pair of shorts. You know, this is what we're talking about. Listen, we're independent Baptists for a reason. We're independent because there's no other church that's going to dictate to us what we teach or how we teach. And so, listen, we ought not to want to please man rather than God, but when we have that kind of attitude, listen, we're in a trap. And so, listen, having a fear of man will cause you to sin against God and keep you from doing God's will. We have people who are scared to go out and try to share the gospel with people because, well, what will people think about me? Well, I hope that's not your case. Because if you're more afraid of sharing the gospel with somebody because you can't get over your own self, then fully willing letting some people just go to hell because you don't want to because you're afraid. Listen, this is why we have these things. That's why we have the Romans Road. We can type it out or have it and bring it in our Bible, and you can have it right there with you. You don't have to fumble through the pages. I remember the first time I shared the gospel, I had all the verses memorized. And I was a nervous wreck. But did I let it stop me? No. When we're afraid to speak up when people are doing wrong. Just today, I had somebody that was doing something at work that was not safe. And that person's team lead told him to do it. I said, no, you're not going to do that. I said, that is totally unsafe. Oh, really? I said, oh, yeah. I said, you need to do something else. Now, I'm low man on the pole, but I know when something's not safe or not. I can't be, well, what if that person doesn't like it because I want them to like me? Well, I want people to like me, but you can't be afraid to speak up. And so we need to not be afraid of this. In verse 25, the fear of man bringeth a snare. Talking about the fear of man is wanting their approval. That's what it's talking about, that fear of man wanting their approval. But whoso putteth his trust in the Lord shall be what? Safe. Trust the Lord. All right? But if you're having a fear of man, will cause you to keep yourself from doing God's will, not only doing God's will, but if you're afraid of what people think, you're going to miss out on blessings from God. There is no doubt about it. You will miss out on blessings that God has for you and your family, but if you're more willing you have that fear of man, then you're going to miss out. Wanting man's approval more than God's will put you in a snare. I think it was this weekend. There was this mom and daughter where we used to, in Florida, where we served. And his mom posted a picture of their daughter and saying how beautiful she was. No doubt the daughter's beautiful. Very pretty young lady. But when I saw the picture, I almost commented, what corner is she working? because it was that bad. It was, skin tight. It was right here. You bend over, you see everything. And I wanted to say that. Why do ladies, why do you dress like that? Because you want man's approval. You want the approval of your peers. And I don't know if this woman is trying to live vicariously through her daughter or what. Because her mom is not posting very good pictures either. And I asked my wife, do you know what they're thinking? Of course she doesn't. We're two different states. We have a gulf between us. She doesn't talk to them. But I'm like, too many times we're worried about man's approval than we are God's. And I can guarantee you that if that girl continues to dress like that, she dressed like that at school, I wanted to say, don't be surprised when her peers and other men start talking to her like she's a prostitute. Start talking harshly to her and vulgar to her. Because let me tell you something, ladies don't dress like that. I'm not a lady, but I know they don't dress like that. And I'm not trying to beat a hobby horse. We ought not to dress a certain way for man's approval. Okay, and so we need to be more concerned with God's approval, because if we're more concerned with God, then it says that we will be safe. Many seek the ruler's favor, but every man's judgment cometh from the Lord. Listen, there's times that, yes, we need to seek the approval of our government because we need to obey laws. But there is a time and place, like in Romans, when it says we need to step out of that and be in civil disobedience. Well, and there's always that question, when's a good time? Ask God. He will let you know. He will let you know. And so, yes, we need to obey the law of the land to a certain extent, but when that law oversteps God's law, then we ought not to seek the favor of the ruler. All right? And so, listen, whose glory are you seeking? Are you seeking God's glory to glorify Him and to get His approval, or are you seeking man's glory? That's a question we need to ask ourselves, because I know every day I deal with that. My own self, am I doing this for me, or am I doing this because I want so-and-so to like me? Am I doing this because I need the approval of this person, or am I doing it because it's right? And I need to be doing it because it's right, not because I'm seeking approval. Listen, do I want my boss to like me? Yeah, because it works a lot easier when your boss likes you. It's a lot easier. But let me tell you, I'm not going to pander to go over and beyond to make sure that I have his approval. Because if I'm doing right, I will have his approval. If he's honest and he's doing what's right. And so, listen, whose glory are you seeking? Whose glory are you seeking? Father, as we conclude tonight, Lord, I know it wasn't an exciting one, and the message may not been maybe something we was ready to hear, Father, but we need to discuss this, Lord, because I know every single day I'm faced with these questions, and what am I going to do? And if I'm wrong, am I going to do it right, or am I going to have an attitude and just not listen, Father? But I pray that I myself would be the type of believer who would take the correction, Lord, and listen to what's going on, and wouldn't have to be that type of person that just wants to talk or has a bad attitude and not listening to what's needing to be said. Lord, I pray that we as believers, we wouldn't have that attitude either. Lord, and that we wouldn't be more concerned with man's approval than we are your approval. Or we ought to be set to glorify you and not man. Lord, thank you for your word, what we have, with the warnings that we have, the teachings that we have. Lord, may we apply these to our life so we can glorify you, Lord. And so that we can lead others to you. Lord, I want to thank you. Lord, I ask that you have your will and your way in the invitation. For it's in Christ's name I pray. Amen.